Good morning. I thought I would just run you through some of the material on the Julian laws. Nobody posted any particular questions, and actually looking through the answers you've come up with, I think that's probably because everyone seems to have managed very well, those of you who have done it. And I know that some of you haven't managed to get it done, and I think that given that you also have an essay due in for Mr. Horlock, that's perhaps because you've got quite a lot on. So I'm going to set this piece of work, which I think will only take an hour, possibly less, across 2 lessons to give you a bit more slack as well for that essay task for Mr. Horlock as well. So I'm just going to run through the handout, which you should be able to see on your screen at the moment. This is on resistance to the Julian laws. You've done the questions on the Julian laws. You know, they encouraged children by giving promotion opportunities to those who had children. And you know that they also did this by putting problems in the way of those who did not have children and get married. So, for instance, banning them from inheriting money from outside the family and so on, and restricting who they could leave money to. And in many ways, this was it was entirely designed to encourage more children and more moral behaviour, and Augustus is presenting himself here as saving Rome almost from itself. So the worksheet for today is just drawing on this, but picking up the sense that actually Augustus really struggled to get this through, that people didn't like it, that they hated it, in fact, and it had to be remodified and changed, and never really went down well. In fact, this isn't on the worksheet, but we know of at least one case under Tiberius of a woman who went down, a senatorial woman who went down and registered herself as a prostitute. Not because she wanted to actually be a prostitute, but because if she was registered as a prostitute of meretrix, then she would be immune from all the laws governing well-brought-up Roman women. So, the Julian laws were in 18 BCE. They were the year before the secular games, and most of you have picked that out in your questions, this sense that actually he needed to have improved the morality of the people of Rome before he could celebrate a new golden age. So there were various rules, and so this lesson looks at the problems with the Julian laws, the resistance. So as Galinsky noted in the questions you've done on the marriage aspect, and there were also controls on lavish excess, on luxury, that is known as sumptuary legislation. That is optional vocabulary, you don't have to know that phrase. Laws were actually deeply unpopular with people who disliked having Augustus interfere in their marriages, their sex lives. They disliked having him tell them to have children. They particularly disliked the fact that these laws moved adultery out of the private family realm and into the criminal realm. So divorce and adultery have never been crimes before. They're certainly not in our society either. So previously in Rome, if you cheated on your husband or your wife, the family would decide what to do about that, and there might be forgiveness, there might be having another go, there might well be divorce, but it would never be a criminal offence. But Augustus actually pushes this away from the power of the father and into the authority of the state. And so he's taking power from the paterfamilias, the father of the family, whose authority is known as the patria potestas. The father figure had a huge authority in Rome, so he's not just the head of his husband and his children in the sense that we might think of it. He's the head of a household, so that's his wife, his children, his children's wives, slaves, his children's property, and it carries on until that man dies. Really the only way to get away from the authority of your father, if you are male, is for him to die, or for you to be adopted into another family, and if you're a woman, it's to be married in the most formal way out of your family and into another family, and that power is known as patria potestas, and it actually goes all the way up to the authority to execute a child. So this lesson's really looking at the evidence that people just didn't want him to tell them how to live their lives. So the first bit's picking up the Carmen Saeculare, Horace's secular hymn, and so perhaps looking at the way that he presents these laws not as Augustus's laws, but as the Senate's laws. So these are the decisions of the august body, the whole Senate, rather than Augustus, this one interfering man. Then there's an extract here from Suetonius, looking back about 140 years to the laws, talking about how he revised laws and brought in new ones, and also he refers to some of the resistance. So the questions here ask you which class of society these laws were aimed at, and you'll notice here it's really not about the poorest classes, it's about these elite classes. So to be a senator you have to have over 1 million sesterces, to be an equestrian you have to have over 400,000 sesterces. That's way beyond the wealth of most normal people. Suetonius tells us Augustus was forced to change aspects of this legislation, and there's details of that in the passage above. And Augustus, realising how resistant and how resented his laws were, made use of members of his family. Not himself, actually. He was married twice, despite not being keen on remarriage, and had only one child, despite encouraging at least 3. Livia, his wife, did have 2 miscarriages with his children, but that never really counted in the Julian laws. But strictly speaking, they were at least trying to have the children he was encouraging, and he adopted his grandchildren. But he couldn't really use himself as an example of members of his family having children, but he absolutely could make use of his granddaughter and Germanicus, and shown here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of their children. There are at least 3 more who died in childhood. They were producing children like rabbits, those 2. There's a nice bit that we know that the Roman elite, knowing that they either have to be married or engaged, but not wanting to be either, decided to get engaged to small children, and then because nobody wants to marry a small child, they could say, well, I am engaged to this 3-year-old, I will marry her when she's a sensible age, like 17, and then they could just put off marriage for 14 years or so, by which time they might have got engaged to someone else, perhaps a new 4-5-year-old. So it's a good dodge, but Augustus obviously cracked down on that. And then a little bit of Propertius. Now this isn't a set passage from Propertius, so you won't find it in your pack, so I've put it in here. But the poem does seem to suggest Augustus had tried to bring in laws like the Julian laws in the past. So this referred to a law repealed. So a repealed law is a law which has not got through or has been pushed back, has been undone, whose promulgation drove us once to tears of business. So a promulgated law is a law that's been put out, and they feared it might part them. So a pair of lovers parted by a law, that does sound like a law about who you can sleep with and who you can behave. And then it seems to gently mock Augustus, to separate a pair of lovers as beyond the power of Jupiter and mighty Caesar too. He might be mighty in war, but war is nothing when it comes to lovers. And they're so pleased to have this law fail. He's called Caesar here, and the notes above make the point that the fact he's called Caesar, not Augustus, might suggest that this law was as early as 27 BCE, perhaps, or maybe even earlier than that. So really very early. And so question 6 tries to pick up on that. And then question 7, Propertius, perhaps not 100% convinced about the militaristic elements of Augustus either. So he's not convinced on the Julian laws. Is he convinced on the militaristic stuff? Well, no soldier shall be born. Of my blood no soldier shall be born. Love's warfare is the only war for me. So, I mean, that doesn't seem like he's entirely on board with this whole Roman militaristic element under Augustus. So, 7 questions. I don't think it's going to kill you, but since a number of you haven't managed to finish my previous questions on the Julian laws, and you have an essay from Mr. Horlock and questions from Wilson, I am going to set this across 2 lessons, even though I don't think it will take all that time. So I hope everything is going well for you. I would remind you that if you are stuck, if you are confused, if you are puzzled with either the Odyssey or the Imperial Image, I am available for Google Meets and Skypes and things of that sort to chat through any issues that you have, and I've enjoyed doing that with some of you. So do just email me if you need that help. So, chin chin, and I shall see you, well, I hope I shall see you soon.